Hello, I'm Brian Dawson with CloudBees. Today I have the pleasure of chairing the CI/CD track for DevOps Online Summit 2021. And I even have a greater pleasure of hosting a session with Jim Shilts, founder and head of community at the North American DevOps Group, or what y'all may know as NADOG. Today we're going to discuss embracing the DevOps community. Hello, Jim. How you doing?
Hey, Brian.
So maybe before we get started, you can give a summary of what topics we'll be covering in today's session.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. At a really high level, the things that I want to share today are talking about what the value of a community initiative is, why companies should be embracing this approach, some of the strategies that you can use and the types of communities that you can embrace as well and get started. And then also how you get started with an initiative like this. I can talk a little bit about how I got started, and then maybe talk a little bit too about if I were to do it again, how would I get this started?
Perfect. No, I'm excited. I mean, we know that we've spent a good amount of time together. I've had a pleasure joining you on NADOG sessions in the past and partnering with you on some other types of events. And I have gotten to experience firsthand your ability to rapidly build effective communities. What I don't know, Jim, because we haven't talked about it much, is how you got started. So can you tell our attendees here at DevOps Online Summit how you got into community leadership?
Yeah, it was actually kind of by accident. You know, I was working in the sales team at CA Technologies 6 years ago, and working with the marketing team there and trying to find better ways to connect with our end customers. I think people are really numb to, or they get numb to very fast to all the common approaches. If you think about, like, I started way back in the day when we were sending things out via fax. We had fax servers, and then you'd follow up on the responses to the faxes, right?
Right.
Yeah. It was, after Pony Express, but before email, right? So, but then it shifted to the phone. You're doing lots of phone calls, and people get numb to that. And then it shifted to email. That just keeps moving. But one of the things that I learned was, funny enough, people don't want to be treated like a prospect. They want to be treated like a person. No. So I wanted to take that approach. I wanted to get to know people. I wanted to provide a community. Really, I didn't know I was creating community, but ultimately I wanted to create a community where people could come share ideas with each other and actually meet each other, and I could meet them as well. All right, if I'm providing something of value, the people are going to come, and I can have a regular cadence with them. That was really my entire goal from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. And well, can I ask? Let's dig a little more into that. On that journey. So what I hear is you kind of had a specific need. You went to bring together a community event, and in that you discovered the importance or effectiveness of building communities. Can you talk a bit more about why communities are important, and in particular, why communities have been important in this DevOps movement that we all are partaking in?
I don't know if you can turn on screen sharing, Brian. I do have a few slides that I can use as we kind of talk through some of these topics.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to turn sharing on for me.
Let me go ahead and hand that over to you. Can you see if you are able to share now?
I'm good now. All right, so let me try this. All right, are you seeing my my deck now?
It is loading up. It says you've started screen sharing, but it is not showing. And I'm going to go ahead and take a pause for a moment while you square this away, and then we'll bring 3, 2, 1. So, Jim, thanks for sharing that. Now, what I heard, which is really interesting, is you didn't set out to start a community, so to say, but you ended up bringing people together. That resulted in starting a community, and through that process, you recognized the effectiveness and importance of a community. Fair to say?
Yeah, For sure. And like I said too, I recognize that the conversations I was having with people there were a lot more open and direct, right? I wasn't hitting them over the head with any kind of sales hammer. I was having a conversation about who they are and what they do. Think about if you're, you and I are both older and we're probably way past when we ever did this, but if you're going into a bar and you're trying to meet somebody and you walk up and just start talking about yourself, it's probably not going to happen, right? So you gotta actually ask questions. And you have to listen, and people don't want to be treated like a prospect. They want to be treated like a person. So at these events, I was treating people like person. I realized the conversations I was having were more about who they are, what they do, what their challenges are, and I was creating a bond. We were also having personal conversations about what we do when we're not doing DevOps, when we're not at work. And that's a really, really great thing. And it makes our jobs a lot more fun. And you end up coming out of it with some really great relationships. I've got to meet people like you and people from all over the world now because of NADOG that I never would have connected with before. That's been really the big value of this community that I started building.
And can you talk about that value and importance in the DevOps community? Because obviously there is an overall community building aspect that is important, but NADOG has been frankly very instrumental at connecting people specifically within the DevOps community to help them move forward, connecting people with vendors and solutions that can help them. Do you have any comments about the specific importance of community in this DevOps movement?
Yeah, and I've done this survey a couple times, right, where I've taken like the COMS or COM or acronym, whichever one you want to use, and have asked people kind of where the biggest challenge is for them. Is it around the culture aspects of DevOps? Is it around the automation or lean, or is it around measurement or recovery? And all the time, it's almost half the people say culture is the hardest thing to do. And I think part of the problem is, as vendors, a lot of us end up talking about or labeling things as a DevOps tool, right? Or labeling people as a DevOps engineer, which really ends up being something related to automation. A DevOps tool is probably an automation tool. A DevOps engineer is probably someone who's working in CI/CD and automating build and test and release. So I think we need to go back to, and that's really one of the things that we try to talk about a lot at the NADOG events, is that culture and sharing aspect of DevOps, because it is so hard to get started with. And it's very hard to get the whole company bought into the real direction that DevOps should be bringing everybody in, because DevOps isn't about the developer or the automation or CI/CD people, or even about the business. It's about all of them, right? Working in sync and understanding how the gears that you're turning affect the whole machine.
Yeah, that is, and I'll have to end up paying Chris Bytart royalties as much as I cite the chance I got the time I got a chance to interview him. And I think you're probably aware, Jim, but Chris Bytart and Patrick Dubois had come together to create the original DevOps days based on a realization that people that ultimately had shared responsibilities to deliver software, dev and operations, weren't communicating. And one of the things that really struck me that resonate with your findings and what NADOG has done is they said really, to them, DevOps was all about culture, collaboration, and community. And I think at times on this journey, we've forgotten how important that is, not only at large, obviously, as we're talking a bit about here, right, in the larger open community, your so-called DevOps group that was the precursor to NADOG and Eurodog, right? But as you just cited, it is very much focused on building community within organizations, right, to align around shared objectives. Right. And so to that end, how can an organization get started building out a community initiative, either internally or publicly facing?
Yeah, and very good question, right? That's the $1 million question,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that we tell people a lot too when we're talking about attending and participating with NADOG, is that it's hard enough to collaborate within your own company, let alone outside your walls. And so that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to facilitate that in the local area. When there's no pandemic and we're doing live events, we're getting together in San Diego and in Boston and Seattle and all the different cities where we have NADOG groups, and bringing that whole community in together. Get outside of your walls. Come listen to how other people have already solved these challenges you're working on. Make those connections and meet those people. But then taking that same attitude back to your own company, and treating the internal team that you work on that way, but also all the other teams that are interconnected with yours. I went into, and I tell this story, and I won't tell you who the company is, but we were working on a project with them, and I was meeting with the DevOps team, and it was two guys that were the DevOps guys who, again, they ended up being automation engineers, right? And we were working with them in a conference room, and then we decided we were going to go to lunch. So before we went to lunch, they had to go up into their office and lock everything up and get their keys. So they said, "Yeah, I'm going to walk you up and show you." So we get up to the floor that they're on, and there are cube walls that are about 6 feet high, like a sea of them. So you can't see any faces. And then their offices were facing each other with two doors with keypads on the outside that lock with no windows on them.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, you guys are the DevOps guys, huh?
Right.
First thing you need to do is knock all these walls down and take those locks off the doors. So it's a mindset, right? That a lot of companies in the legacy way that they do things, DevOps doesn't fit with that. And they're trying to fit a DevOps mentality or methodology into the way they used to do things. And it's really about knocking those walls down and building it back up in a way that is more collaborative.
And so when we talk about, kind of overall strategy, and actually, just to comment, not to move past that, that is actually a powerful analogy, right? For even when it is not cubicle walls, obviously there's design that prevents collaboration, but even we have those virtual walls. I just want to go in a locked room, put my head down in a cubicle and do my work. But as we're focusing on here, that doesn't tap into the value of shared knowledge, aligning around shared objectives. So when we get into how do we overcome that, how do we develop a strategy to do that, what are some of the highlights, some of the key points that you would share in strategy development for building community outside and internally?
Yeah, and super important, right? And that's the first place I would start. I would start with strategy. If you're going to build a community, you need to understand why you're building it, right? What value is it going to bring to you? And then what value is it going to bring to the members of the community? Because there has to be value on both sides, or else you're not going to do it anymore because you're not getting any value, and they're not going to come anymore because they're not getting any value. So those things have to marry, right? And they have to align. You also need to decide what type of community you're going to build. There's multiple different types, right? And I actually, it's really exciting time to be in this space, because when I started 6 years ago, there was no literature really about this. People were just kind of winging it and learning it. Now there's great books. I've read this one a couple of times. I don't know if you've seen this one by John O. Bacon.
Power? No, I have not, but I'm going to put it on my list.
Maybe we can.
By John O.
Bacon. Awesome book. I've read this one twice. There's an audiobook version of it. I've gotten to talk to John O. He's actually going to speak at a NADOG event in July as well. So excited about that. Then there's another one that someone else just recommended to me that I'm reading now called The Business of Belonging.
Okay.
By David Spinks.
And who's the author on that?
David Spinks.
Awesome.
Yeah. So David, one of the things he talks about is these different types, right? Like a consumer community versus a champion versus a collaborator community. And I won't go into the specifics on what all those are right now, just for sake of time. But you really got to understand what am I trying to do here, and what's my strategy, what's my real strategy, what am I trying to get out of it, and then finding the right type of community that fits into that. And sometimes, if you're a vendor, you might have multiple types of communities. You might run a consumer and a champion and a collaborator community. Especially, a collaborator is more for like an open source project, for instance, right? Like a Jenkins community where you've gotten people all collaborating and working in that fashion. Making sure that this aligns with your corporate goals as well, right? Like,
can I and to rudely interrupt because I'm so curious, can you share with me and our attendees? So a collaborator community is going to be more focused around open source. You're bringing people together to share information, to focus on bringing a specific project to fruition, for instance. And then you also mentioned a consumer and a champion. Would you mind taking a moment to define those?
Yeah, so consumer, think about an example that David gives in his book is think about if you're a band, right? You are think of what's a good band?
That's you dated us earlier, so I'm gonna have a hard.
Well, here I'll go back to one I know that we both like, Run DMC, right?
There you go.
Say you're Run DMC, and you wanna bring the community, all of your fans together. So you create a forum. That's a very simple example of a consumer type of community, right? A lot of people with the same interests, bringing those people together so they can share with each other and share their experiences, but they can also interact with Run DMC in this community.
Right. And so that would be akin to somebody that wants to build a company that just wants to build a community around their brand to have an increased level of brand engagement, right? That may facilitate some feedback, but it is around sharing around similar interest, and in this particular example, similar interest in Run DMC.
Correct. Okay. And so now think about a champion community as really a consumer on steroids with a lot more features into it, right? You're going to have a governance processes around that as well, right? Like, how can people actually move up in the ranks in this community? How can they contribute more to the community and share? How can they blog? How can they speak at events that you do? So it's really a much more interactive type of consumer community. Okay. So a good example for a champion community would be something like CloudBees, right? If CloudBees wanted to bring, create really NADOG is a collaborator, or is a champion community. Okay. Right. So we get together, we talk, we share ideas and things, and people can come in and speak. They can contribute blogs. It's really more about moving up in the ranks and sharing and being much more interactive and involved in the community. Right. All again around a similar interest, and that can be around a specific product, like a CloudBees product, or it can be around a specific space, like DevOps, like security, or whatever it is.
And then now you say, and that then you have to ensure that aligns with corporate goals or corporate objectives. The type of community is aligned with driving clear objectives.
Correct. And whatever those objectives are, right? I mean, people like to see bottom line. They want to see how this is going to affect revenue, which can be a bit tricky to show. But I think the companies that really get the most out of community aren't that focused on tying members of the community to revenue. They understand the effect that and the power that community has. Because even if you're CloudBees and CloudBees, by the way, has been a huge sponsor and supporter of NADOG for a long time. And the value that CloudBees would get out of it is, we're supporting this DevOps community. We can attend these events and not hit you over the head with our sales hammer. We're there to talk and learn from you, and you potentially learn from us. We're experts in this space. We're people that you should know. There's a lot to that, and I saw the effects of that as well when I was working at CA, especially, where people again don't look at me. As much as I say you shouldn't look at your customers as prospects. They're people, and interact with them as their people. You want the same the other way. You don't want them looking at you as you're a sales rep. You don't want that label. Not that it's bad to be a sales rep, but wouldn't you much rather be a person? And so presenting yourself that way. And I saw that. I mean, I have a lot of close friend relationships that I've developed through this, and I ended up being involved in a lot of opportunities because of it as well, because people would see me as a trusted advisor and approach me that way.
And is it fair to say, before we shift on to some of your other points about starting community initiatives, to speak to the internal community, right? So, for example, I think both you and I have experience with either DevOps days inside organizations, lunch and learns. I know you have experience bringing to bear Jenkins workshops, open to others, but happening within the context of a given corporation. And do the same principles apply? Like, for instance, when you come together, if you're going to host these DevOps days, have a clear focus on what your objective is. Do things such as people are not prospects, kind of clarity and, to an extent, purity of purpose for the group. Can you share or help me understand what sort of in a NADOG, what NADOG principles transfer to building community with inside of an organization?
Yeah, and I wouldn't call like doing a Jenkins workshop or DevOps days really necessarily a community. Those are really more events, right? But okay, you can use those as tools to support your community. Okay. Like, for the Jenkins workshops that we did with the CloudBees, there are Jenkins area meetups, which are communities, and we were using the workshops to support those communities. Okay. Right. So your community itself, you're going to have in one of these books, maybe it's both of them, they call them clubhouses, right? Your clubhouse is either it's the place where you gather, and it could be a physical or virtual. It could be at a brewery, like at an ADOG event. It could be on a Slack group. It could be at a workshop, right? So you have to have these clubhouses where people get together. You can have one clubhouse, and that's the way that your community is run, period. Like if it's a consumer community and you have a Run DMC forum and that's all that you guys do, that works, right? But like NADOG, we've got multiple clubhouses. We get together in physical locations all over the place. We get together in some of the big conferences like DevOps World. We help support things like All Day DevOps and some other groups. Right. But then we also have a Slack group. We've got a blog space on our website. We've got groups on LinkedIn as well. So we try to offer multiple channels for people to come through, or multiple clubhouses, depending on how people like to get together with us. Oh, and we also do virtual events now as well, since last year. Well, so another way for people to participate.
To get together. And so what I hear now, what I'm going to do now, and what our attendees are going to do is they're going to go through an immense planning phase, and they're going to start their equivalent of a NADOG champion community. Is that the way we should go, or what's first step?
Yeah, well, first step is understanding the strategy, right? I mean, you got to sit down and really figure that out. But I've seen people, though, spend so much time in that strategy phase that they want everything to be perfect. They want everything to be built out. They want to have 10 clubhouses. They want to have all this stuff lined up. And then they launch this community and nobody comes. Right. My recommendation is figure out the basics, get yourself 80% of the way there. That's kind of the rule of thumb that I always have. If I'm 80% of the way there, I'm 100% of the way there in terms of I can actually go out and do this, because you always need to leave that room for adjustment. You're never going to be totally there. I always go into the mindset that this is 80% baked and it can always have another 20% of improvement here. So get the basics in place with what your strategy and direction should be. What value am I expecting to get out of this? What value is my membership going to get out of this? But then get going, right? Yep. Start small, but start. Don't sit around and wait. When I did the first NADOG event, I waited for a couple of months. I was like, I should go do this. And then I didn't do it. And then a couple of weeks go by. I was like, I should go do it. And then so my boss at the time, her name's Allie Tierney. So huge shout out to her. She kicked me in the butt. Right. She kicked me in the butt a little bit, and she was like, all right, stop talking about it. Open up your calendar and just put a date on the calendar. And then now you're working toward that date.
Right.
So I did. And I love that strategy too. That really works for me to this day. So anytime I want to do something, I'm like, you know what, just pick a date. And now it's there on my radar, and now it's coming, and I start working toward it. Right. So same thing, you want to get out and start a community with your company. Like say CloudBees wanted to start a CloudBees specific community. Figure out what the direction is, figure out what the basic strategy is, outline that a little bit, do a little bit of internal workshopping maybe, right, and figure some things out in what direction you want to go, but then get one of those clubhouses open and get it open for business and just start getting turns to the crank. As you know, with a DevOps mentality too, you shouldn't be afraid to fail. You want to put some things in place and some safety nets so you don't fail spectacularly, but falling off and into the net is okay, because you always climb back on and try it again. And the more times you do it, the better it's going to be. And if I look back on when we took all of our live events last year and had to move them all online, we just did it, right? And they were pretty bad at first, and we had to learn. We had to learn a whole new skill, because online wasn't the same as doing things live. But we did our best to plan a little bit going into it, and learned from the first one, and the next one got better, and the next one got better. And I think we're on a pretty good rhythm and format now. Not to say that we don't continually look for ways to improve those as well as we go, but again, we're 80% of the way there always. That's my
okay. Right. Always continuous improvement, incremental evolution. And as you had shared with us earlier, the SoCal DevOps group, first couple of sessions, it was 8 people, right? Now we flash forward a similar concept, similar topic. And with NADOG, you effectively, when we consider Eurodog and NADOG, you effectively have a worldwide DevOps community. So it seems like that's a perfect example of get started, seed, grow, mature.
And pollinate, right? So pollinate. Seed, build that foundation in the seed stage. And again, I'm taking this from these books, so I don't want to it's funny because I've been doing this for 6 years, and a lot of these things I've kind of learned, but I was never good at articulating it the way that some of these thought leaders have, right? But it's awesome, because I read through these, I'm like, yes, that's right.
That's the word to explain where I found success.
Yeah, and reading these, and other things. By the way, these guys have videos and stuff too, and other people do. Really helps me to kind of look at it and get a little bit more organized and thoughtful about how we approach continuing to improve what we do. But starting with a seed stage where you build that foundation, growing it to the point where it is mature, and now you're starting to bear some of the fruit from it, and then learning how to pollinate that group. But ultimately, what you want is for it to self-pollinate, right? Where members of the group organically bringing other members in, and it's growing that way, and you're having to do less work in terms of planting those seeds. But really, once you get all of those stages up and going, you're really managing all 4 of those at the same time. It's not like you abandon the seed stage and move on. You got to be open to go back and try to improve your seeds and improve your foundation.
So that actually gets to where I want to dig in a little more. So you've been doing this for 6 years, right? You've had 6 years of community building and community management. What are some of the key takeaways, some key things that you've learned beyond what we already discussed?
The biggest thing that I learned, one of the biggest things really, I guess after the first couple of years of doing it, I realized, okay, we have an audience now, right? And I'm getting some benefit from this. They're getting some benefit, but there's more that we can do with this, right? As good members of the community, community really provides an excellent opportunity for you to just do some great things and to lead by example, right? We ended up supporting a charity called STEM Advantage. They're an organization down here in Southern California. They raise money for scholarships, internships, and other programs for women and other underrepresented groups who are pursuing careers in STEM. Right. Awesome organization, right? And we have the power to help organizations like that. So we should. So I think that when you do have that power, you should do your best to utilize it in good ways. Another thing too that I've learned along the way is that really, if you're running a community, you shouldn't think of yourself as being competitive with anyone else at all. There's lots of DevOps groups, right? There's in every major city, there's at least one DevOps meetup group. Bigger cities, there's 10 or 12, or, related groups. There's a Kubernetes group, there's a CI/CD group, DevSecOps, and so on. but really being good partners with them is always the best way to go, and it's the best for everyone. There's no reason why we can't all live together and support each other. We shouldn't feel competitive. I've worked with you on DevOps Radio. I've partnered with CDF and helped support a lot of things that they do. The people at All Day DevOps, Derek Weeks, awesome. Mark Miller too. There's a group.
Derek a moment ago, actually.
Good guy. Yeah. There's a group called Women in DevOps as well. Lauren Langdale runs that group. Well, you've met Lauren as well, right? So, I've had events where I've brought DevOps Radio and All Day DevOps and Women in DevOps all into the same event. We have a lot that we can offer to everybody. So as good community members, we should be striving to bring that information and cross-pollinate as much as possible, because I think it's just good for everybody.
Agreed.
And another thing too that I think that I wasn't good at, I just wasn't paying attention to it, right? It wasn't in any kind of deliberate way, is really making an effort to ensure that we're socially aware and that we work to overcome the biases that we might already have, right? To make sure that the events that we're doing, the things that we're doing are welcoming and representative of everyone. For instance, like at our live events, we would do lots of events where there might be 50 or 80 people at the event and not a single woman, or maybe one woman at the event. Yeah. And so why is that? It's not because we're not inviting women, but, and I've talked to Lauren about this as well. And I think it can be intimidating for maybe a woman to go to a beer and pizza event after hours, right? With a bunch of guys. So being aware of that and focusing more on, well, maybe if we have topics or speakers that are more appealing to women, we can get a better representation of the space. So being aware of those things and making an effort to overcome those, I think is super important for everybody, no matter who you are.
Right.
And then I talked about the books as well. I did a lot of this on my own. I didn't do a whole lot of research on anything. It was a lot of learning on the job. And so what I would highly recommend to anyone who is looking at getting a community started, talk to people who have already done it, right? There's a lot of them out there, and most of them are extremely nice. Like Tom, who runs DevOps Online Summit, like Derek, like Lauren, like me. I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about it. I'm very passionate about this. And I love, if somebody's interested in it, I'll talk about it with you all day long. Like I have here, I'm just feel like I'm going on and on.
No, but, you're not. It's been important information. And look, I happen to know you, and I happen to feel a similar way. You're passionate about the topic, and when I'm passionate about a topic, I want to talk about it. I want to share. So absolutely, not oversharing. We appreciate it. That does get to a good point in terms of how can our viewers, how can our attendees become involved with NADOG?
Yeah, so with NADOG specifically, super easy, right? If you're an IT practitioner or an IT leader, you just go to nadog.com/join. There's a little form. You get to put your email in, and then you'll get updated on when we're doing events. Okay. You'll also get invited to our Slack channel and all the other clubhouses where you can gather with us. If you want to speak at an event, there's a /speak on the website. You can fill out a form. We have basically a small call for papers form that they can fill out. We'd love to hear anyone who has a DevOps related story that they want to tell and share with the group. Those are always the best topics that we offer. And then if you want to support the group as a sponsor as well, if you're a vendor and you want to show that, hey, we're supporters of this and we understand the value of this and the value of community, /sponsor at nadog.com. We'll give you a form for that too.
Awesome. And is that, how do our attendees get in touch with you? Is it through the NADOG website? Is there an email address or Twitter handle you want to share? I know you're like the kids these days. Maybe it's Snapchat or TikTok.
Yeah, I don't. You know what? I don't even really understand Twitter, so so I'm the wrong person. I do understand LinkedIn. I'm very good with LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn is linkedin.com/in/Jim Shilts, JIMSHILTS. And I assume we can maybe put these links in this as well for people to get and some sort of description. They can also just go to the website and there's a contact us. I'll eventually get that. Or you can always get me at jim@nadog.com. I'd love to talk to anyone out there who wants to talk about any of this stuff.
Phenomenal. So, Jim, as we get ready to wrap up, I want a moment to thank you for taking the time to contribute and submit a talk to DevOps Online Summit, taking the time to sit down and share information with us, but really also taking what was a pretty brave step and sticking with it to build what NADOG is today. And I think there's a real lesson to take away, not only in your journey, but there's a DevOps lesson. And as you unabashedly say, look, I was a sales guy at CA. I was trying to figure out how to build business. But what you did end up building was community, and community that helps people on multiple fronts, your speakers, your attendees, your sponsors. And I think there's a real key takeaway here that I'd like to share, and you may have additional comment as we wrap, is look, DevOps and the art of software delivery is not just for the developers. It really involves everybody. And if you have an interest, you have a skill or a point of view to bring to the table, no matter what your role is, you can come in and contribute to bringing progress forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say it like this too. 90% of DevOps is listening, right? If you're not listening to what everyone else is doing, what everyone else is saying, you're missing out. If you're doing all the talking, you're not collaborating. So come to these events, even if you're a non-technical person or you're just getting started or you're interested in it, come and talk to people, because people that have been doing this, they're proud of the things that they've achieved and they want to talk to you about it, and come listen to them. And you'll always be welcome at our events, and we'd love to have you out there.
Jim, thank you. Those are perfect closing thoughts to our attendees for DevOps Online Summit 2021. Thank you for attending. Please reach out to Jim, NADOG, and attend our other sessions. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. See ya.